is Jacob Kitoto from School of Hospitality, Travel and Tourism, Department of Hospitality Management. I'm going to take you through legal aspects in hospitality and tourism management. That is BHT 4208. And for our topic for today, we are going to look at the hotelier and the guest. The objectives of the lesson is that at the end of this lesson, the learner should be able to understand the legal definition of an inn and traveler. Two, to understand the legal definition, to appreciate the duties of innkeeper. And three, to understand the right of an innkeeper. Now, let us start by defining an inn. What is an inn? An inn is an establishment held out by the proprietors as offering food, drinks, and if required, sleeping accommodation without special contact to any travelers presenting himself who appears able and willing to pay a reasonable sum for the services and facilities and who is fit for the state to be received. So, you have understood what we mean by the inn. So, there are two things that the inn provides. One, it provides food, that it offers food and drinks. And two, if required, accommodation. So, there are two main things, food and drinks. Then accommodation if requires. And also, we are told that there are conditions that is given for you to be accepted. One, you should be able to pay the required sum amount. Two, should also be able to be in a good state to be received. So, without being in a good state, even if you are able to pay, you will not be given the chance to enter into the inn. What about traveler? Who is a traveler? A traveler includes any person from one place to another who call at inn to make use of the services available, that is drink, food, and accommodation. So a traveler is a person who move from one point to another point and who will request to be provided by food, drinks, and accommodation. That's a traveler. Hotel guest register. Hotel guest register means registering upon arrival as provided in the Hotel and Restaurants Act, Chapter 494. So, it is a must that each and every hotel has hotel register. To register any guest upon the arrival, the guest must be registered. So it goes ahead and tells us that Section 11, verse 11, 1 provides that every hotelier to keep a register in his hotel and shall enter or cause to be entered in the register the name and address. So, which means the law requires that every hotel must register persons visiting that hotel. And in that register, the name and address of the guest must be included in that register. Duties of an innkeeper. Duties of an innkeeper. First of all, we need to know who is an innkeeper. An innkeeper is the person who is in charge of the inn, that is the innkeeper. So, duties of an innkeeper. So, an innkeeper duties to provide a refreshment. So, this is a duties imposed upon innkeeper at the common law. So, the innkeeper is to provide the traveler with that which is amount to reasonable refreshment at any hour of the day. So the innkeeper has the duty to provide the refreshment to the clients. So that means that you are taught that there is no definition of a refreshment. What the innkeeper deems is fit as a refreshment. It can be even a sandwich. It can be even a tea. It can be a drink or any other that they feel amount to a reasonable refreshment in a given day, yani in the hours of the day or night. So it is not, refreshments are not provided as a specific time, so that you say that, okay, the guest came at 9, so you don't give a refreshment. You are supposed to provide refreshment any hour of the day or night. Failure to provide drinks without a reasonable excuse may render the innkeeper liable or criminal prosecution. So the innkeeper is supposed to give out refreshment, and failure to that, the innkeeper may be prosecuted. So when we talk about reasonable refreshment, as I said, that it will vary. It will vary according to the time of the day at which the traveler calls at the inn. For example, an inn which has set a meal time when the restaurant is open, traveler can demand a full cooked meal only at those times. So if the clients come at the time of the meal when the restaurant has set the meal at that time, then the clients have the right to be provided with that kind of meal. Equally, travelers can demand an alcoholic drink only during licensing hours if they are not guests. Drinking hours, if they demand, but they can only demand the drinks alcoholic during the time that is specified by the government or the authority. Innkeepers are under duty to provide only that which they have available. Again, the customer should not demand as a specific item. The innkeeper has the right to provide only what they have, what is available at that time. So the customer does not have the right to demand that they be supplied with anything that is outside what the owner of the restaurant have. Next, duties of the innkeeper, continuation. The innkeeper is to provide the travelers with accommodation at any hour of the day or night, if the client requires. However, the innkeeper may refuse to provide accommodation if the excuses for doing so is reasonable. So, we have seen that they have the duties to provide refreshment. They also have the duties to provide accommodations. However, they have right to deny the accommodation if they will give the justified explanation to the clients. Note: an innkeeper is not legally bound if he or she has no food available at the inn. So, which means the innkeeper will not be liable, is not bound liable if there is no food. So the customer is not supposed to demand. If there is no food, you simply apologize to the customer and tell the customer that we are sorry, at the moment we don't have any food that is prepared, so that the customer might take any alternative. So, but the customer does not have the mandate to demand that he or she must be provided with food or refreshment. Prior booking. If a traveler demands a meal without prior booking and the restaurant is full, the innkeeper has the innkeeper breached his duty. That is what we are asked. But if the prior booking was not done by the clients, therefore the client, the owner of the establishment does not have to provide what he or she does not have. However, if an innkeeper refuses to serve the travelers in the restaurant and offer no alternative when it might be made available elsewhere within the inn, it may be breached the duty of the law. So, the clients will ask for the food or refreshment. But in case it is not there, the owner of the restaurant may refuse to give and also give an alternative that we don't have, you might wait, or you go to the next restaurant. But if he doesn't do that and there is an alternative, if there is an alternative, which means the owner has just refused deliberately, then the owner might have been in breach of the law. So, travelers not in a fit state to be received. We are told that the law requires travelers to be fit so that they can be in a good state to be received. Otherwise, they will not be allowed. So, it is a reasonable excuse to refuse a traveler refreshment if he or she is not in fit state to be received. And as I said, that at what point do you think a traveler is not in a good state to be received? A traveler is not in a good state to be received when, one, this traveler might be in a wrong dress code. For instance, where some people are halfly dressed. So that is not a good state to be received. Two, if a customer or a traveler has excessively drink, that means that now he or she cannot be received anymore because he or she is not in a good state to be received. A traveler can also be reasonably denied a refreshment if he or she is unable to pay for the sum of the refreshment. So, if the traveler or the customer is unable to pay, then he cannot or she cannot be received. If an innkeeper were to refuse service on the basis that a person was not in fit state to be received because of sex, race, color, then it is illegal and will render the innkeeper liable. However, we are warned that hotel keepers are warned by the law that they should not refuse to receive the guests on the basis of the ground of the color, on the ground of the sex, or on the ground of the race. If the innkeeper does that, then they will be liable and accountable, and then they can face the force of the law. Pets and dogs. An innkeeper may refuse to serve to a traveler who insists in bringing into the inn a dog or some animals. So, an innkeeper is not supposed to bring in an animal with them when they are entering into a hotel. They should not, and if they do, then they may not be allowed to enter or to be served, because by law does not require to have this, because by doing that, they might expose food hygiene, which means they might bring in some contamination to food that is being serviced. And again, to that, it means that the innkeeper shall also breach the law food hygiene regulation, because once they allow pets, and dogs, they will bring these bacteria that will definitely interfere with the food by injecting some bacteria inside the food. So the food will be contaminated, and thus the guest might be affected. The duty also to provide accommodation, this one I've just said, that we have the duties to provide refreshment, the duty to provide accommodation. And again, it is not mandatory that once you receive a guest that it must be given accommodation. The laws state that an innkeeper is not bound to provide accommodation so long as the inn is not full. When all beds are occupied, the innkeeper is not duty bound to provide accommodation. If the accommodation or the hall is not full, the hotel is not full, well and good, give accommodation. But in case the hotel is full, then you do not have any accommodation to give out, and it is provided by the law. Therefore, the innkeeper shall not be liable, even if accommodation is not provided. Innkeeper right to refuse service. This one we have just talked about it, as refuse service to travelers in certain circumstances. And these circumstances, one, the travelers appear able and unwilling to pay a reasonable sum. If the customer is unable to pay, and also is in unfit state to be received. Travelers may be perfectly fit to be received upon arrival at the inn, yet their conduct at the inn show them unfit. And that's what I said, that somebody can be smart, that is, the guest can be smart, but sometimes their behavior. You see, a guest has no right to talk maybe bad words to other clients, or to throw bad words to the people who are serving them. So that one alone will be enough to deny him or her the reception. Note, the innkeeper's right to refuse service is flexible. So, okay, this one is just saying that these are just standards that are given in order for the innkeeper to control or to give out the standard, so that the innkeeper has something to control the behavior within the inn. You know, when you say you will not be allowed to come in if you don't do this and that, then of course you will have to abide by the rule. So it's a way of regulating some behaviors within the inn. However, it is an offense to refuse service, accommodation, or to discriminate against a person who seeks to obtain those goods and services on the ground of racious ground or ground of person sex. As I said, that as much as you will refuse, you will set the standards. Don't set the standards on the ground of race, or on the ground of color, or on the ground of sex. That will be something that is outside the law. The innkeeper towards the duties, towards the property of the guest. The innkeeper duties towards the property of guests. So what is the innkeeper's duties of the property towards the guest? And innkeepers have strict duty to care for the property of their guest under the Hotel and Restaurant Act. It is upon the innkeeper to ensure that the guest property is protected. And that is why when you go to a hotel or a restaurant, at the reception you will be asked if you have some valuable item so that they can keep them for you safely. Failure to that, if you don't give out and they are stolen inside the room, then they will not be liable. If they don't ask and it happens that the items are stolen, then the hotel will be liable because it is their duty to ensure that you are safe. The duty is, however, not owed to travelers. So guests and the travelers are different. A guest is a person who has engaged a minimum of one night accommodation. But a travelers, not a must. A travelers might come and just move out, just come maybe for meals and walk out. But a guest is at least a day of accommodation. So these duties are not owed to travelers. They are only owed to guests. The innkeeper is also an insurer of the property of guests which is lost or stolen within the perimeter of the inn. So that is why you are told, the innkeeper is told that they must ensure that the property to the clients is well secured because they will pay. They are the insurer of this property. So in order that an innkeeper be strictly liable for the loss or damage to the guest properly, Restaurant Act demands that for the guests to claim that they have to be paid for the lost property, then they must prove to the innkeeper, one, that they had been received by the hotel. They must also give a proof that at the time of the loss or damage, they were travelers who had engaged accommodation at the inn, and that the goods in question were of sorts of covered by the innkeeper's duty. So you see, at some point, some guests are very clever. They want to be compensated, and they will always claim that their properties got lost when they're in the hotel, but they must have the proof. So not every loss of the property will be compensated by the innkeeper. There must be a proof. The innkeeper will not be held liable where the loss or damage sustained to a guest property is due to an action of God or the action or other action, e.g. flood, thunderstorm. You see, there are some things that are natural. Like flood, you cannot, is something that you cannot control. Thunderstorm is something that you cannot control. And others like landslide and all that. Those are things that they are nature. So, innkeeper is not liable. The right of an lien. Lien is someone who is just a passerby, like if I can say so. The innkeeper may detain and thereby has a right of lien over any property brought by the guest into the hospitium of the inn. Hospitium is that the area within that perimeter of the inn, if the guest cannot pay up the bill. So, in case a customer comes that is just passing without booking and as is able to pay, then the innkeeper does not have the right to detain this person. The innkeeper is not, however, entitled to detain the guest because of the statutory exclusion, parking fee, car wash, etc. Next is that an innkeeper is not entitled to detain the guest vehicle or property left in the guest vehicle. So in case of the innkeeper is not able to pay, then the innkeeper does not have the right to retain the vehicle or anything that is inside the vehicle. Contractual rights. The innkeeper is in similar contractual position as any other hotelier. However, this freedom to contract is somehow limited by the duties to provide refreshment and accommodation, payment. An innkeeper have a right to payment in advance. This is because they are only allowed to receive travelers who appear able and willing to pay a reasonable sum of the services and facility provided. So sometimes you find that the customers may ask, why do we have to pay? Which means that the innkeeper has that right of payment in advance. If they request for payment in advance, that is their right, because sometimes there are customers who tend to pay half, and then after that they will not pay the rest. So if the customer wants to test whether the customer is able to pay for the services, then the innkeeper will demand advance payment. The innkeeper can also require payment in advance to ascertain whether the traveler is not able to pay or not. That one I think we have talked about. The right to control inn. So the rights of innkeeper also, he or she has the right to control the inn, which means the innkeeper has the right to control the conduct of the inn subject to the duties which they owe to travelers and guests and other statutory restraints. So the innkeeper has that right to ensure that the behavior within the inns is controlled. The innkeeper may also enter the room to guests at any time. So the innkeeper has also that right to enter into the room of the guest without even notifying the guest at any time, so that the innkeeper controls the conduct of the guest. That is the end of our lesson 2, and thank you for listening.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.